Okay, welcome. I'm going to go ahead and get started. I see that it's 11 o'clock. I want to welcome everyone to this AdobeSign training. I would like to say thank you for joining me this morning. And if you're getting joined in at this time, please join us throughout this session. I really appreciate you being here. The purpose of today's meeting is to go through a little bit of a review process for generating supplemental contracts. And I'm going to be focusing on supplemental contracts, not the standard contracts that you as an employee receive once a year, but rather the supplemental contracts that are generated from time to time for things like additional activities. For full-time faculty members, sometimes we generate a supplemental contract for teaching overload classes. Sometimes we generate supplemental contracts for people who help out with the activities at our athletic events, and so on and so forth. So these are the supplemental from time to time contracts that I'm going to walk us through today. Also recently, the Adobe product has gone through some changes. And so your interface with the AdobeSign product has changed. I wasn't made aware of the change before it happened. One day I just logged in and it looked very, very different. And I feel like that's the same for many of you. Over the course of the last several weeks, people, or even longer than that, time has flown by. But some people, their interface changed, and others actually lost access to AdobeSign for a period of time. And so hopefully by now, the access issue has been resolved. Our tech services has been able, hopefully, to resolve your issue if you have not been able to gain access. If not, please contact the help desk and find out when they can get you set up with an AdobeSign account. But essentially what happened is AdobeSign used to be a separate entity or a separate software product. And now it's been umbrellaed under the Adobe Pro contract. So in order to be a generator of the contracts, you have to have an Adobe Pro account, which was not the case when we adopted AdobeSign all those years ago. So I'm going to go through just a couple of reminders, and please, please, please don't hesitate to stop me and ask questions. I also want to put a huge caveat in here that I am not an expert in any way, shape, or form. I'm just trying to help get everybody kind of back to the same page. In general, can everyone see my screen with the title page? Okay, great. I want to just, for our purposes here today, I'm going to go over contract basics with everyone, just to remind ourselves about what the basics of the expectations of the contracts are. And I'm going to go through the process of AdobeSign. So I'm going to upload it to AdobeSign. I want to prepare signatures. I'm going to review and send. And I want to make sure everybody's on the same page with regard to the important components that are easily missed. Sometimes with these contracts, we see things that are easy to forget. So I want to make sure everybody has a reminder for all of those. So, and then at the end, of course, we'll have question and answers. So if you want to hold your question to the end, please feel free to do so. If you want to interrupt me because your question has to do with whatever it is I'm talking about, that's okay too. So please don't hesitate. But for contract basics, I want to remind everyone to use the most updated version of the contract as possible. So many of you perhaps have saved a version of a contract in your personal drives or in a location that's convenient for you. But sometimes what happens when that occurs is that the form itself is updated for reason X, Y, or Z, and then the form you have doesn't get that update. So make sure and use the most updated version of the contract that you can. Right now, I'm going to show you. Can you see the little pop-up, my screen when it pops up where the, good. So I'm going to go to T-Common. On T-Common, if you go into the archive, I know that's not the greatest place, but I haven't moved them because I fear that if I move them, no one will know where they are. So in T-Common archive, if you just go down to the forms folder, which is here, the most current that I'm aware of, supplemental contracts are located here, and they are called subcontracts. So if you go down to the S's, I have 4 different contracts for you to review. one of each type in both Word and PDF. So if you are generating a supplemental contract for an adjunct or a part-time employee, you would use subcontract, adjunct, or part-time. If you are generating a supplemental contract for a full-time employee or a full-time faculty member, you would use subcontract full-time. Now, I have them available here for you in both Word and PDF. The PDF is a fillable PDF. It's kind of easy to use. The Word form is not as simple to use, but you do have the ability to manipulate the Word document if you so desire. For example, if you need to add an extra row somewhere in the descriptions, it might be helpful for you to have access to the Word document. But for most of you, you would pick up, the PDF and start filling that out. And so my recommendation to you is to go find that document. And if you want to save it to where a common thing, and the reason why people save them to their own location is because it's easy to pop this open and start typing into it and then save it. And then you've saved over the template. Just every once in a while, make sure that you've got the most recent version of the contract. So I'm going to open up, I've got one I'm going to be, that I prepared as like a test for us today. So I'm going to open up a test version and go over some of the reminders here. So this is what the PDF fillable form looks like. Just checking, are you able to see that okay? Okay, great. So each one of these fields has something for you to complete. So if in this case, I'm making a test example, but you would put the employee's name here in the name field. And then the employee ID, that's something that you must have in order for it to be paid. You must have their ID. And then you'd put in the year, the school year. The reason for the authorization of the payment is either adjunct or other. And if it is other, please make a description of the activity here. So maybe it's, I don't know, game maintenance. That's one I see from time to time that's not a class. But you put that description here. And if there is additional information that supports the reason for the contract, click that box and add it to the document. And then identify the fiscal year for the contract and then which semester you're in. It looks like I forgot to do that. So I'm going to say spring for my test here. And then you would put in the activity here. Now, I have provided an example of paying for a class. So let's say the class is Test 10111. That's the class. And then the class name is listed here. One of the things that payroll asked me to remind everybody is, regardless of the type of activity, please remember to place the location of the activity in this field. Sometimes that is left blank, and I understand that payroll has to do some querying or some data analysis based on the location. So please remember to always put the location. If it's a class, that could be Chanute or Ottawa or online. It could be Garnet or La Harpe or all kinds of places. So put the location wherever the activity is happening in that spot. If it's a course, then you're going to have a credit hour definition next to it. If it's not a course, you won't have that. So that could be left blank if it's just some type of activity. But the start and end date should be listed regardless of the type of activity. If they're going to do a class, that might go from January to May, as in this example. But if it's game maintenance, for example, that's a date. You would put the date that it started and the date that it ended, and it may be the same day, but that is an important component of this contract. And then for a class, you would list how many students are in the class. The number of students is important because of the concept of prorating a class with less than 8 students. I'm going to give an example of that in the next line, but for now, let's say there's more than 8 students in it, and so the pay rate for that class is currently $575 per credit hour. So the total pay for this particular scenario for 3 credit hours, 3 times 575 is $1,725. And so that total is over there on the right. If we have a class that has less than 8 students in it, in this case, we have 5 students, we would have to do some additional math to establish the rate, the pay rate. The pay rate, sometimes I see this on contracts. They don't adjust the per credit hour rate for a prorated class. So if we have 5 students in the class, that is 5/8 the pay, the normal pay. So you take 5 out of 8, that's 62.5%. So they would get 62.5% of the 575. And you do that math, and that turns out to be $359.38 per credit hour. And then you multiply again that by 3 to get the $1,078.14. You may have to round within this math problem, but you should be able to do that. And then the next thing I'd like to remind everyone for, and if you have questions about that and you're a course ID sponsor and you don't understand what I just said, we will go through that together one-on-one at another time. If you're developing a contract and don't understand proration. In general, proration is only allowed with my approval. And if for any instance in which that has to have an exception, if there is an exception, and let's say we've got a class that has 5 students, but we are paying full, and I've allowed that exception, we need to describe that right here. We need to briefly describe that exception. So you can again ask me those questions if that happens. The next thing I don't want to forget is this total line at the bottom. So what I've done here is added up these 2 items and put the total right here. This is helpful for payroll. Sometimes you have to use that line for another activity, but if you can put the total there, that is really helpful to payroll. It's just as a double check. They of course can do the math, but it's just a nice way to double check the math for everyone. Once you're finished with that, make sure you've got an account number. Oh, it looks like I missed this amount. I need to add this amount here. So that amount is 2803.14. I should put a $sign in front of that. And online compensation is not applicable anymore, but then make sure you've got the instructor's email address listed there. Now you've got to think about the payment for this person. 2803 is the amount that they're going to receive, but you have to decide with them how they want that payment to exist. Do they want 3 months of pay? Do they want 4 months of pay? Do they want it all in one amount? And that is generally up to the person receiving it and you as the generator of the contract to decide together. But once you've got that figured out, you can put in the amounts per month that they get paid. And please, again, make sure that the amounts sum to the correct total. Make sense? It needs to sum to the correct total. And then once you have that filled out, then you're pretty much ready to upload it into the AdobeSign process. Do you have any questions at this time about any of those items? Okay, so just as a reminder, T-Common is the location. Don't forget their employee ID. It will not get paid without it. The location of the activity, I just was asked to remind people to make sure to put the location in it, make sure you have the total, and make sure the monthly amounts sum to the appropriate total. Sometimes you have to make a decision there about a penny or 2 pennies. So make sure that those pennies add up to the right amount. Does that make sense? Okay, the last thing I'll put here is, as a reminder, contract deadlines. Every month you receive an email, I believe, from the business office that identifies the deadlines for payroll. And so contracts are typically required by the 20th day of the month, sometimes earlier depending upon the month. So like in November, when we have Thanksgiving or when we have December, Christmas, and spring break, those are months that typically have an earlier payroll cutoff. And so please be cognizant of those deadlines so that the contracts can be received by payroll. Next up, I think I'll just go to AdobeSign unless there are any other questions. Okay. So for me, for what I have done, I have made a bookmark for the login page for AdobeSign. So I've put that in I have a lot of bookmarks up here, and that's just the way I use I use Chrome as my primary browser. There are other browsers, of course, Mozilla Firefox and Edge and others, Safari and others, but I use Chrome primarily, works well for me in most applications. And so I've developed a bookmark here for Adobe Acrobat. If you need this link, oh, I'm sorry, it already knew I was me. So I'm gonna log out. And so this is what the page looks like when you go to log in. So if you would like this, I'm going to just copy this location into the chat. Just in case you need that for your reference. Sometimes I used to have it linked, and honestly, for ever since the thing changed, my old link would like take me to this new link. So I just made the new link as my bookmark because it's a little bit easier. So then you go to sign in. And you'll have to put your email address in there, and you all should have this kind of established for yourselves. You continue, and then you put a password in. And then for me, I have a very complicated setup because I have more than just Adobe Pro. I have Photoshop and InDesign. And so for me, I have to remember that it's the blue guy, not the birthday cake that I pick. So I pick that one, and then it takes me in. For you, hopefully you don't have to do that. I hope that's the case. But then it says, hello, Sarah. We're happy you're here. So this is what your new landing page looks like in Adobe. And it looks a lot different than it used to from AdobeSign. However, I want to just point out a couple of quick things. For me, when I like to click on Documents, Documents will take you to something that looks like what AdobeSign used to look like to me. This is where you can find all of the ones that are waiting. I have 2 waiting for me from this morning, apparently, and those in process and drafts and all of those things. So you can find your documents quickly just by clicking that Documents tab. I'm going to go back home. It also has some tool options here to fill and sign. You request e-signatures. There's an artificial intelligence assistant that I have not looked at. I have no idea what that's all about. I haven't had the time to review that. I apologize. But you can do all kinds of things with your tools here. You can also go to eSign at the top and click in and do fill and sign and get others to sign and manage your agreements. So there are lots of ways to get to the place that you need to get to. Does anyone have any other ways that you've been working through this to get to your documents as a signer? Now, as a generator, hold on, we'll talk about that next. But as a signer, does anybody have, you can also, of course, get the email and it links you directly to the signatory page. So if you're a signer, you're going to receive an email and it's going to say, hey, please review and sign. And you click that link and it just opens for you and you can review and sign it in that way. Any questions about that? But if you're like me and you get about 40,000 emails in a day, because that's how many I feel like I get, sometimes what I do at the end of the day or at the beginning of the day, I just go in and look at all the documents and I see, oh, well, I've got 2 waiting on me. So I just go through the list at that time. So let me, so right now it's probably, confidential. I probably shouldn't show you the ones that are waiting for me, but if I wanted to, I could click that and then they'd be listed there and I can click them and sign them as needed, if that makes sense. But let's talk about generating a contract. So this one says request e-signature, send a document to anyone to e-sign online fast. And so I'm going to click that. And it says, okay, I can select a file to request any signature. Earlier, I showed you a test that I had created. So I'm going to drag that test. I saved it in a file for myself, and I'm going to drag that right here, open it up there. Okay, so this is the same contract that I just showed you, except I didn't save it after I added that total down there. I forgot to do that, but this is how it pops up into it. Now I need to know who I'm sending this email to, or who I'm sending this contract to. So the first one in this test, I'm just going to use a fake, well, not a fake, but an absence email. Just because I don't want to accidentally send it to someone and they sign it. So I'm just using this as an example. If you were making a contract for Bob Jones, you would put Bob Jones's email in here, and that's where it would go to. But in my example, I'm just using absence, and I'm going to use that as the name. If I want to add the next recipient, I know that it's going to go to 4 people for signatures. So I know that it's going to go to absence, and then it's going to go to absence's supervisor, and then it's going to go to me, Sarah Robb, the chief academic officer, and then it's going to go to Sandy Solander, the chief financial officer. So I know I'm going to have 4 recipients. Sometimes you have more, depending upon what the contract is. Sometimes you have less, depending upon what the situation is. But you can add recipient by clicking here or here. I'll just add another recipient. I'm going to make this Tony Jacobson. And once you've typed their name in a couple of times, it recognizes it for you. So it's kind of easy. You can say, oh, that's Tony's email address. And I'm going to put that in there right there and type his name. And then I'll click the plus sign and add a recipient. And I want to do that again. I want to add myself because I'm the 3rd signer. So I'm just going to add myself next, and it fills it in for me, which is super nice. But then I want to add Sandy, and her email address is there, and it remembers Sandy. There she is, and I'll type her name. Now, before I move forward, I want to highlight the fact that this box right here that is clicked by default, on my system, it was clicked by default, but I don't know about everyone else. I just want you to please highlight and make sure that the recipients must sign in order. That is a prioritization, so it goes to the first signatory, then the second, then the third, then the fourth. If that is not clicked, an email is generated to all 4 people at the same time. And that means that payroll has to wait and watch for it to make sure all 4 signatories complete their task before it's paid. Now, I, as a supervisor of supervisors, I need to know that the person that was signing before me approved of this contract. I need to know that. So the prioritization of the signing in order is a very important component to making sure that this is that the contract moves through the process effectively. Otherwise, I personally don't feel comfortable signing a contract that the person that reports to me is not okay with, or I don't know if they're okay with it. So they must be signed in order. So please make sure that this checkbox is clicked in this process.
How can we make that be default? Because I will say that my first 2 I sent out this time, I didn't even realize I had to. And then even after I realized it, I have forgot. So is there a way to make it default?
I don't know. I'm sorry. I don't know the answer to that. It just, when I clicked it, it just stayed clicked for me. Is it not staying clicked for you?
No, I have to click it every single time, and it's just not a habit yet. So that's,
okay.
you know,
That's an issue. That's an unfortunate issue that perhaps there's a way to do that default. I'm sure there is a way to do that. But I don't know the answer right now. So maybe if we hold on to that at the end, I can click around and try to find that before we exit. But we can move forward now if that's okay. So default checkbox. Other people are probably having that same experience, Amber. So I want to make sure and get that accomplished before we're finished. Does anybody by chance know the answer to that question? Okay, well, we'll click around and find out a little bit later. So the next step before that we go, next step is to prepare the document. So I'll click this button after I've got my recipients in line and my boxes clicked. I will prepare the document. Excuse me. I'm so glad this is being recorded. Okay, so now I have this document, and now it looks a little bit different, doesn't it? It has these weird colors in it. And so the AdobeSign system thinks it's pretty smart, and it is to an extent, but it recognizes those empty text boxes as something that you may need to fill. So this is a point in which I'd like to share with you, if you do not delete the empty text boxes, when a signer receives the contract, sometimes they are stimulated by the system to click through every single box that is available. Like it expects you to maybe type in some text information in a text box because the system automatically thinks, rightly so, that this is a text box, but it's not important to this contract that it has anything in it. Unfortunately, there's not a great way to avoid this step because I could create a template that doesn't have all of these text boxes, but what if you need the text box? So unfortunately, the thing for you to do is to look through here and say, you don't need a signatory, doesn't need to spend time clicking through this box. It's empty for a reason. So I'm going to click on it and then I'm going to put it in the trash. And I just trashed that. And so that means that I've deleted that field and no one will have to click through it in order to get to their signatory line. This field has something in it. This field has something in it. And so do all of these. But this field I can put in the trash. And so can I all of these. Does that make sense? So this is a tedious step for you. And I apologize for that. You can also make it readable only or make read only. Either way works. But for the purposes of this, I'm just going to put them all in the trash. Have any of you experienced as a signer having to click through all of these things? Okay. Well, sometimes you can just click to the place that you need to sign and it works out just fine. And so if you forget to do this step, this is not critical. This is just a courtesy step for the signatories. This is not a critical step. So if you are in a rush and you do not have time to delete all of these empty text fields, you do not have to.
Is there a way to select more than one box at a time and delete multiple boxes?
Let's try that. Yes.
I know I used to be able to click tab and just push delete, but I can't do that anymore.
Yeah, it's allowing me to select more than one. So right now, if I click this one and I don't need it, and I push down Control and click this one, it
Nice.
allows me to click both of them.
Great.
So I can, two fields are selected and I can trash them all at
Great.
once.
Thank you.
You're welcome. However, I just realized that I should have had an amount here. I messed that up. So I should have had an amount here. And so please make sure that that is filled when you do this in the future. That amount needs to match that amount, and it needs to match the sum of all of these amounts. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay. And you also, of course, need your account number. This is a text box that's not needed. And so I'm going to select all of these and push Control.
Sarah, if you do what you just did and didn't mean to, can you go back in and fill the amount in?
You sure can.
Okay,
I
great.
can do that. I can add a text box back right here, just like that. So did you see
Okay,
that?
thank
I
you.
found text over here and I want to put text back in this box. So now I'm going to click off of it and then just click in it. How do I, oh, there he goes. So now I'm going to put that amount to, 280314. So now the text box is there and I filled it. Make sense? Okay, so now down here, signatories. So I am going to click this box. I know that I need this to be a signature box, not a text box. I need it to be a signature box. So I can click on it and just change the field type. I thought I could. Why isn't it not?
You
doing-
need to choose a signer first, I think.
Oh,
Like the recipient. There you go.
okay, there we go. So I've got a recipient, it's the absence recipient. And now thank you very much, Maggie. Now it gives me the concept that that's a signature box. A long time ago, you could just drag these over, and I think you still can. Unfortunately, it makes it look really bad because it puts it on top of a text box. And so you've got like the signature on top of a text box, and it's not very clean looking as a document. So please try your best to, so on this, so I know that's absence. So my next one, I'm going to highlight that. I'm going to change the recipient to Tony as the second signer. And now I'm going to click it again and change the field type to signature. And so that will have the recipient's name and the date and time that they signed it. So does that make this text box necessary? Not at all. Because the name and the date is in the signature field. So we can delete those text boxes. I'll do that here at the end. The next one is the third signer. In this case, the recipient will be the third person. That is me in this case. And then I'm going to change the field type to signature. And the last one here, I'm going to change the recipient to Sandy and change the field type to signature. I am now going to control and select these text boxes and trash them. Do you have questions about that?
So are we gonna need those signature boxes anymore on the forms?
Do you mean
No,
the date
the
boxes?
date, the
Yeah,
date.
we could eliminate those based
Okay.
on the system, because this provides the date and time of the signing. And also have, you guys may or may not know this, but you can also review the history or the history of the actions related to each contract. I can show you that later.
Now, can you save this document other than the first signature and just add those in later and keep because you would be, at least in my end, you would be the third and Sandy would be the fourth and I would be the second.
Yeah, I am not sure. You may be able to save that as a template for you to use
Okay.
in AdobeSign. You may be able to do that. I've not gone through and tried that personally.
Okay.
I apologize.
All right, thanks.
Other questions before I move on?
If you figure it out, Dr. Yuzo, let us know.
Will do.
It would be nice. A lot of people like to have, I mean, in the old mechanism, you could do some different things, and now it's all different. So we will try to figure that out. The next step, and I'm sorry, my Zoom stuff is kind of in my way here. This little statement down here is incredibly important. This one says, check this box to confirm that you have copied payroll in AdobeSign. Well, in our new system, you haven't done that yet. That step is yet to come, but it is a good reminder to remind yourself that the copy of payroll is incredibly important. And so I'm going to click this box. I'm going to make the recipient myself, but I'm going to have it pre-filled so I don't have to click it again. So do you see that? This was something that I learned recently. If I don't want someone to click it, I'm the generator. And so I'm responsible for copying payroll, and I'm remembering that step now, but I don't want to have to click it when I'm signing, when I'm taking the action of signing. So I'm going to select me as the generator or the preparer of this document and say that's a pre-fill. I believe. I hope that's all I have to, well, it needs to be clicked. Okay, so you can double click it and it'll pop open this customized field, or you can just right click and customize field, and then you check it and it is required and it's pre-filled. So that's how you check the box. Again, double clicking or right click, pardon me. It's not. Here's where I say, remember, I'm not an expert. So I think it's just double clicking. But you should be able to customize the field before you assign it to someone. Questions about that? Okay, that's incredibly important, but you haven't done it yet. So your next step is to review and send. Review and send is when you feel like you're ready to review, everything's filled in, you know your stuff is matching, you know you've got the right amounts here, you've got everything filled in, you've got your signatures established. So next is to review and send. Pops up with a new box. Here, unfortunately, you have to click more options to be able to CC payroll. So add a CC is under more options on the very last step before you send it, that you type payroll at neosho.edu. Now, the reason why this is important is because if you courtesy copy payroll, they will be able to see it as soon as you generate it so that they'll know it's coming. They will also get a finalized copy of the contract when everybody has signed it. But if you CC it in their system, they know it's on its way. And so in their preparations for payroll, they will be able to monitor and watch that and watch for the signatures to come in. So we do not want to use payroll as a signature line. We do not want payroll to sign the thing because they won't see it until it's their turn. And if they're the last one on the signatory list, they won't see it at all until the very end. And so that's why we elected to do the courtesy copy or the CC instead of making payroll a signer on the contract. Does that make sense to everybody? So please, please, please remember to do this step. It's hard because it's the last step and you have to click more options to be able to see that. But that is one of the most important things that you do. Do you have questions about that? Okay, it'll review your recipients. You can create a message. You can customize your message or use the one that's pre-filled. You can set email reminders for people if you want to remind them to sign it if they haven't signed it. In general, most people are pretty quick to sign their contracts, but sometimes, especially people who don't look at their Neosho email regularly, sometimes we have issues with especially concurrent instructors who use their USD and don't get things forwarded effectively. So you can set up email reminders if you so wish. And then your last step is to pre-fill and send. You click that. And that pre-fill is the only thing that's pre-filling is the CC checkbox. I think. So why is it doing this? Why is it showing? I'm sorry. Why is it showing me this? Does anyone know? It should be sent. It should be being sent at this moment, right?
The only thing I can think of is the check mark thing.
Okay. Well, I did something wrong, but now it was sent successfully for signature. So now it will be sent to absence@neosho for a signature. I'll go in and delete it here in a little bit.
I'm
Yeah.
wondering if it was the order of who it was to be sent to. Because I've had to do that. It wants me to sign it immediately if I've marked myself first before it'll send.
The first signer was absence.
Yeah, I don't know what it's doing, but that's what I've seen happen in the past.
Sarah, normally when I select anything pre-fill and I myself am the pre-filler, it always makes me click that and then it shows me that box again and then I submit.
Okay.
It usually does do that whenever you have something pre-filled.
Okay.
You can check mark that box though and not make yourself a pre-fill, because that's how I do it. I've never done the pre-fill. I just check the box.
Okay. So that would just be selecting the box and customizing it and doing the checked, right?
That is nice though, that it prompts you that you checked that box as a pre-fill. Did you actually
Did I actually
see
CC
payroll?
payroll?
Yeah.
It's a double check for yourself. So
Yeah.
you guys can do that how you desire. I like the double check. I like the making sure. But if you do it without the pre-fill, I think that's completely fine as long as payroll is copied. Okay, what questions do you have at this point?
Sarah, this is Mandy. I had one question about something in the very beginning.
Okay.
When you were speaking about the student number and we need to prorate that amount, do we need permission to prorate, or we're only asking permission if we're asking for an exception to that rule?
You only need permission if you are asking for an exception to that rule.
Okay.
If you are prorating, the number of students is less than 8 and you're prorating, that's a standard procedure. And so you do not need approval for that.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm. The course sponsors that I work with regularly with regard to general education students, we do have some additional rules about that, but those are like, for example, in online classes, Maggie will work with me for special permission if there's less than 4 students in it, because in an online class, it requires effective communication between students, and I don't know how effective that can be with less than 4 students. So she and I work through that, but that's a whole different thing.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? So here's the important reminders. Make sure signatures are in order, and we're going to see if we can't figure out that default here in a minute. And then CC to payroll, not a signature. And then the last slide I have is just for question and answers. So I'm gonna escape from here. I'm gonna escape.
Sarah, I do have a question. Is
Please.
that able to set up other forms besides contracts?
Is AdobeSign usable for other types of forms rather than contracts? Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yes, it
Okay.
is. I see it used for a variety of things, including curriculum variance requests. Sometimes I've even seen grade change forms travel through AdobeSign.
Okay. Okay.
So it's a usable format for that. You might give people a heads up. I am at this point used to curriculum variance forms coming through AdobeSign. Grade change forms, that's not a normal process for that. Like, not very many people use it. I think I've only seen that once. So normally it's just a filled form that travels through email. But if you want to use it that way, just give people a heads up so that they know it's in there.
Okay. Thank
The
you.
textbook change form is used through AdobeSign.
I have directors that use it for the absent form even.
Anytime we use it, the only thing I just give you a heads up on is making sure that you're using the most recent version of whatever form it is that you're looking for. This is the general help. Ugh, that's too much. Well, maybe Adobe. That's too much. I'm going to be kind of poking around here for a few minutes trying to find the default settings. I apologize. Are there any other questions? Because some of you may want to log off and not watch me poke around on the screen, and that is completely okay if you so desire. But let me finalize if you have any questions for me before you go. Like I mentioned before, this is a recorded session. So I'll send out the passcode and the recording to you once it gets to me. I haven't asked her yet, but I'll probably be asking Maggie to put this on our YouTube channel so that it can be usable by others down the road. So that'll be down the road. It'll be available for people. Are there any items that I failed to remind people to do? Sandy, you're here. Is there anything else that I need to highlight for people?
No, you've done a great job, and I appreciate you going through all those blank fields because, as an improver, it takes a lot of extra time if you have to click on all those. So we appreciate that.
Yeah, and when just as a signer of many contracts, Sandy, I have just gotten to the point where I know, so like if all of the is making me go start, next throughout those different fields. If you just go to the field right before the one that you have to sign, it will just let you sign it without having to go through everything. So that's something that I have done as a signer. Sometimes if you click directly on the one that you need to sign, sometimes it doesn't recognize you. So you go to the one right before it and then click, and then it'll say, oh, you need to sign this blank. And so it'll let you do that without clicking through all of them.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, Amber.
Dr. Rob, I'm looking at a help screen
Yeah.
that indicates configuration is where the signing order controls can be enabled at the account and group levels. There are configuration settings.
How do you get to the configuration settings?
Yeah, it sounds to me like something that a tech services person would set, but if different people in this meeting are getting different experiences, maybe there's a setting somewhere that tech services needs to fix. I don't know.
Okay.
And I can try again because I had all my contracts done pretty early on, so they may have done something since.
Okay. Okay. Well, we will talk with tech services and see if they can help. Enable. I don't see anything obvious in this place. Um, hmm. Yeah, I'm sorry, Amber. So I'm gonna have to delay and say, I'm gonna continue looking into this and see if I can't figure it out. And
Okay,
then-
I just tried one, I just pulled up an old contract and tried it real quick and it's not clicked again, so.
It is not
No,
clicked again.
It is
Okay.
not clicked, so.
Well, in the meantime, to click it.
Yeah.
And hopefully I can figure out the default settings for you in the future. I apologize
That's
that I
fine.
don't know the answer to that.
That's right. I didn't even know the default thing existed, so.
Well, it should be something simple. It's just, knowing how to do it. Any other questions before we finish for the training today? Okay, well, I very much appreciate your time, and I'm thankful to you to be part of this training and for making sure that